So when we think about workforce management and the operational footprint that's going on at a lot of organizations, we typically see three really big execution gaps occurring today in a lot of workplaces. Really, one of those big things is what our friends in the finance department like to call cost leakage. What that really means is we know that labor is one of the biggest costs on any, budget for an organization, right? So when we look at that, we're not able to necessarily articulate where all of that money is going in a really, really clear and crisp way. So that leads to misallocation, some inefficiencies, some places where maybe we could be optimizing the roles or optimizing the responsibilities, but we aren't doing that currently. So that causes a lot of cost creep for the organization, and it makes it so that it's harder to move forward some of the initiatives that you could be doing in order to increase productivity or to stretch roles further, all of these different things that we think about, right? Further complicating that is one of the second execution gaps we see, which is manager burnout. Right now, there's a lot of frontline managers, especially, who really are feeling very over capacity in their roles, and that's impacting their ability to manage their teams in the ways that complete tasks in a timely manner and really drive home the organizational goals, right? So that's compounding this cost leakage issue that we just talked about. And then the final component is what we call data latency. And that's really the fact that most of the time we're reacting to information that's being put in front of us that's historical, that's already happened. It's something from the past. It's something that we then have to go and figure out whether or not that problem is actually something we can address. And that's why way less than half of CEOs right now feel like they have the right workforce data to make decisions in the moment that really impact the direction of their organization in a positive way. So really, these execution gaps, they all impact some very, very tangible areas of the organization that lead to losses in terms of productivity, in terms of profitability, in terms of our return on investment, our operating costs. We impact our margin. We can't really stay healthy in terms of our budget. We impact our retention, so we end up with labor gaps that we then have to fill and scramble to figure out. We impact the trust with employees, which causes those retention gaps to accelerate and causes even more issues in terms of how we're running the operation, right? So these are all things that we as UKG are very, very dedicated to addressing, and it's really the heart of this operating in real time strategy that I'm going to tell you about today. So what does any of that really mean? A lot of times we'll see things like turnover, as an example, as a statistic on some kind of a monthly report. But the problem is that's a report. It's already aggregating some information that's happened in the past. It probably had to go somewhere else, like a data warehouse or another analytics platform. And by the time it gets to you, whatever's been causing that trend to go in a certain direction has already happened. So that's a report, not a signal. What we would love to track is signals. And this graph right here is just a quick example of that. Maybe there are a lot of employees who right now are over capacity. They're overscheduled. They didn't sign up for those work weeks to be that long, and it's causing a lot of strain. And maybe there are other people who are underutilized who feel like the organization doesn't prioritize them or care about them. What we want is to adjust things, right, on an ongoing basis so that people are optimally scheduled and that we know makes them stay longer. But how do we do that? Because when this scheduling equity drops, this equation isn't set up right. First year turnover is spiking. But if we're able to capture that signal at the time when something like this is happening, if we can see that scheduling trend tick up, that person get into that unhealthy zone of scheduling, right? We can adjust that in the moment. We can bring people into that green band more frequently. And we can understand that in the flow of execution, we need to make these moves here, here, and here in order to adjust this in a way that's healthy for the organization and for the people who are doing the work. So that's really what real-time operations looks like, and that's what UKG is able to deliver. So I want everybody to kind of ask yourself a question when you're thinking about things operationally. Why is it that basically whatever we're involved with from a business standpoint, whether it's like the number of screws it takes to assemble a car door, whether it's, the amount of flour it takes to bake a batch of cookies, or if it's the number of buses it takes to, run a city transportation system. Why is it that we can inventory that down to the unit in real time, know where all of those things are and or how they're allocated and how they're being utilized, and even what the rate of amortization is on some of those things in some cases, but we can't get that kind of clarity around our people activity? Why is that never clear? It's one of those questions that, I think haunts a lot of organizations today, and it's something that we can't afford to mismanage. So what we're here to do is give you that individual clarity around workforce activity in a much deeper way than you currently may have it today. So what does that look like from an operational strategy standpoint? Well, really, what UKG is here to do is be the missing pillar in your enterprise technology equation. So right now, we get that kind of SKU level precision right through our ERP. That's that supply chain. That's that inventory that I was talking about, right? We have our IT infrastructure that runs our technology. We have our CRM if we're a customer facing organization that runs, that customer satisfaction piece. But where's the system for people? Right now, this pillar is oftentimes fragmented. It's something that's not interconnected in a way that gives all of the right players in the game the exposure to the right information at the right times to affect real change. And like I said earlier, it's one of our biggest operating expense, if not the biggest one that we have. So that's a critical place where we need to invest the right time to bring this sort of system into the real-time flow of work so that we can make the right moves with our employees. And UKG is really well placed to do that. The reason why is because we are one of the only vendors, if not the only vendor, that looks across the entire workforce. We were born on the front line. We understand from a workforce management perspective, not just how you capture all of the data around what the workforce is doing on a daily basis, but how that data translates into workforce behavior trends, how it translates into the places where you have an opportunity to affect those trends, and the places where you have more of an opportunity to affect how employees feel about the activities that they're doing and how they kind of increase their motivation around some of the activities that they're carrying out for the organization, so that you're capturing that magic metric, which is discretionary effort. That's the thing that leads to deeper productivity, right? So UKG was built to serve that 80% of the workforce that a lot of our competitors ignore. So what does it look like when you stand up this real-time operations? It also protects you from a lot of those external impacts that maybe we don't anticipate, that just change around us, like regulatory landscape. It's a great example, right? We help you continuously calculate those things and allocate against the right rules at the right times in different parts of your workforce and in different territories. We give you global visibility across all of those different rules and regulations that you need to be following. And we give you compliance right from the moment when somebody punches into your workforce management system. And that carries all the way through to your payroll system as well, so that, all of these calculations are being managed by the system so that your people can focus on the strategic gains that you need to be making. So that's what it means when you move from this batch processing, this historical, what we call high definition hindsight, through to this continuous governance model where we're activating all of this in real time because we understand how that data is shifting and evolving. And Workforce AI is what helps us do a lot of this. It's a structural advantage that we have baked in across our entire platform, as you're going to see in a minute. This makes our application smarter in every single moment interfacing with the workforce. We're not just giving you reports again. We're not just serving up information and letting you kind of choose your own adventure with it, right? We're telling you what that information means actively based on the signals that we're seeing. We're giving you recommendations about how to implement the right kinds of changes and adjustments in those right moments. And we're giving employees more control through the self-service experience and quicker answers in plain language to questions that they may have. So this is a major strategic advantage, and it's part of the same system where you take the action. So it's not something where you have to translate over from another tool or another system. And that's what we're really building here ultimately at UKG, is that system of action. You know, right now we have systems of record. They're fragmented, they're batch, they're historical, they summarize things that have already happened. We're orchestrating the present with UKG. We have a unified data system that we bring everything together from. It's real time, and it's designed to look across other systems of record as well and reconcile some of your targets against what's happening with your workforce. And that's ultimately what we build here, this workforce operating platform. We're connecting work data, people data, culture data, and third-party data that we bring in from your other systems into one ecosystem that's supporting you across all of the major pillars of operation in the people space: HR, workforce management, and pay. All of that is wrapped together with an agentic AI layer that's, like I said, actively supporting you in those moments and helping you not to have to sift through all of that data. You can keep doing your work, and we'll show up in the right places with the right information. So today, what we're going to focus on is this workforce management core of this equation here. And that's what Ryan is really going to jump in and start showing you right now. So I'll pass it over to him.
Great. Well, thank you, Keen. Let's start walking through the demo. We're going to spend the rest of the time this session in the live software. And I always like to start my part out with just doing a little bit of a introduction to what you're going to be looking at. So I'm going to start out today as an employee and show you some of the features that we can offer your end users when it comes to self-service and work-life balance. After that, we'll spend some time as a manager, focusing on how a manager can manage in the moment, manage their team, and how we can bring some efficiencies to that process. And then I'm going to wrap us up with what we call our value solution dashboards. Think of these as like executive views to your workforce, real-time access to your data points so that you can make decisions that are impactful to the organization. So to give you an idea of what we're going to walk through here in the rest of our time together. That being said, I'm sharing my screen. I'm already logged into the system. And you can see I'm logged in as an employee named Wesley. His name's Wesley Edwards. I always like to start out doing a little lay of the land. So when we're looking at our workforce management solution, it's a tile-based solution. It supports role-based security. So you can build as many user roles as you need, control what they can see and do, push it out to the users. That applies to these tile dashboards that they see. You will configure what tiles, what dashboards a user has access to, and push it out to them. That being said, we can also give them the ability to manipulate their dashboards. If we want to move things around, employees can drag and drop things, right? Make things in the order they like to see them. Some of these we can hide. Down below, I've got a tile icon. That's where I can add more tiles to my dashboard. But the concept I really want to get across here is ease of use, especially when it comes to your end users. We're going to get better user adoption if these systems are easy for the users to pick up. And I look at this and like to compare it to these consumer apps that we all use day in and day out, right? We got things like Uber and Yelp and Amazon on our phones. None of us took training on those. We just downloaded those apps and we started using them. And I expect the users to have a similar experience here with workforce management. In this case, Wesley is an hourly employee who punches in and out. I think it's pretty obvious how Wesley completes those tasks, right? I have a punch tile. In this case, I have a clock in, a clock out, right? Very easy for the employee to understand this. Now, a little disclaimer here, for today's purposes, we're doing a high-level demo. We're doing this all via the PC, via the web interface. Everything I'm going to show you today, especially from an employee standpoint, is available at a mobile device, should you want your users to have access to it that way. Also available via a physical data collection device. We have what we call our InTouch time clocks. So things like punching in and out, I'm showing it at PC here. If you want to, users could do that via mobile. If we are using mobile, we support functionality called geo-positioning or geo-fencing. high level. That just ensures that the employee is where they're supposed to be when they're doing those transactions. Also, punching is a common thing to do to time clock, so we fully support that as well. But for today's high-level demo, we're going to focus on the web experience here. So punching to me, pretty straightforward. Clock in, clock out. Again, this is highly configurable. This is just how I have this system built. You can configure whatever buttons you want your users to see, what you want those buttons labeled to say, and then what you want them to do when the employee selects them. Something else that I think is important to highlight when we're talking about automation and processing things is the transfer option. Transfers are important anytime the employee is doing something outside of their normal job or their normal function, and it can drive some important back-end processing. Keen's talked about earlier about doing real-time calculations. One of the things we can drive with a transfer is a pay calculation. Maybe the employee gets paid a different rate for doing a different job. We select the job we're doing, as you see in this pick list here. Maybe I'm doing inspector, for example. We can have a unique pay rate assigned to that job and apply that to the employee's time worked instantly. Another example of a transfer would be to route time cards to the appropriate manager for approval. For example, let's say I work at location A normally, and I report to manager A, right? But location B needs help today. I can say I'm working at location B, and now that time worked is going to route to manager B, so manager B sees all the time worked in their location and then can sign off on that time. So we call that multiple approvers. High level, think routing time to the appropriate manager for approval based on where the employee works. And then the most common reason for doing a transfer is just for accounting purposes. Maybe we're tracking things to a grant, an activity, a fund, a task, right? We need it to hit the GL differently. Transfers in real time, allocates the time to those attributes. When we feed this to payroll, hit the GL, everything will be allocated appropriately. It's a very easy task for the employee. Select your transfer and hit the punch button. It's going to drive any of those important back-end processes moving forward. Punching in and out is pretty straightforward. Let's move on to our time card next. You can see I have a time card tile. In this case, it's flagging to this employee. There's an exception, something wrong with your time card. Now, if there wasn't, we'd be seeing some time card totals here. Here's how many regular hours you have, overtime hours. In this case, the time card can't do those calculations because there's a problem. So let's take a look at that and see what we can do about it. To do so, I'm going to hit this arrow, and that's going to take this employee directly to their time card. Now, quick lay of the land here. First time looking at our time cards. Up at the top right, I've got the date range I'm looking at. In this case, I've got my current pay period brought up. You can see we have a library of predefined date ranges, or we can put in a user-defined date range. In this case, we'll keep it on the current pay period. This employee is on a biweekly pay period, so we're seeing the dates of that period along the left-hand side. We're seeing the employees scheduled in and out times. We're seeing their actual punches in and out times. I'm seeing the running total for the shift, for the day, and for the current period. We also have some tabs across the bottom that are very useful. We'll highlight the totals tab here. This is showing the employee how their time card is being calculated, right? We've got the punches up at the top. This is really showing how the system is interpreting those punches and applying pay rules. So in this case, as this time card stands, this employee has 64 hours of reg, 8 hours of vacation. I've got their pay rate in here, $15 an hour. I use that just to keep my math simple. And I can see what those gross wages are. It's an example of doing those calculations in real time in the moment. Now, we clicked on this in the first place because there was an error, right? An exception. I think it's pretty obvious what the exception is. We've got a big red box, right? Wesley punched in on Monday the 11th, forgot to punch out. Now, traditionally, this is something that a manager might have to manage manually, right? They'd have to see those punches, maybe ask the employee what happened and manage and add that. I have a feature in here that I have turned on for today's demo where the employee can self-report or request a fix to their time card. So in this case, I'm going to do that. I'm going to say, sorry, I forgot to punch out. It should have been at 4 p.m. I'm just going to put 4p in that cell, and I'm going to hit save. And you'll notice that it doesn't update the cell, right? The cell goes back to red. I've got this message now towards the top of the screen. your changes have been submitted but will not display until they're approved. Essentially what this employee did was send off a message to their manager saying, sorry, I forgot to punch out. It should have been 4 p.m. We will look at this from the manager perspective in a little bit, but all the manager has to do is hit approve. It's going to update the time card, add that punch. But most importantly, all that transactional data is in the audit trail. So if the employee comes back and contests anything, you've got an audit trail that shows, hey, you submitted this, you put that in there, we just approved it, right? Just protects the organization in those cases. Now we are on our current pay period. We fixed our exception. Let's go ahead and look at the previous pay period. I got a little more action going on here. If we open up our totals, we can see in this case, I've got some regular time, 80 hours. I got 2 hours of overtime, and I got 8 hours of a shift differential. And I just wanted to bring this up again to show some of those real-time calculations. Something else I really like about these totals is on the left-hand side here. I'm looking at all, but I can look at these from a daily perspective. And when I switch to daily, I click on each day, it shows me how that individual day is being calculated. So on 4/27, for example, 8 hours are regular. All the system has to work with is the in punch, the out punch, and the pay rule associated with this employee to calculate that that's 8 hours of regular time. Now you'll notice on Friday, the employee worked a couple extra hours. Again, all I have is an in punch and an out punch, but the system knows based off the rule for this employee that after 40 hours in this example, the employee gets overtime. So it's breaking that out. 8 hours of regular, 2 hours of overtime, and it's doing that overtime premium calculation as well, showing the employee their time and a half and that gross total. I have another example down here. Oh, thought I did. Got my shift. Oh, it's a shift differential. There it is. I couldn't remember which shift differential I set up. But here we can see on Friday, 5/8, the employee worked from 4 p.m. to midnight, right? And in this case, we are applying a second shift differential. Now, again, if you look at what was entered in the time card, all we had to work with was an in transaction and an out transaction. This system has zones built into it in this example. And we've defined a zone for second shift. And then we've defined what is the premium the employee gets for work in that shift. In this case, it was a percentage premium that calculated $1.13 per hour. So the employee's getting 8 hours of regular for that time, also 8 hours of that shift premium. Now, in a traditional world, you may have to collect these transactions in a batch process like Keen was talking about earlier, and pushing that to payroll and have payroll do these calculations for you. That's not how we operate, right? Everything's in real time. As soon as the punches are collected, we're applying these pay rules and doing these calculations. And think of the value there, right? So now I'm an employee. I'm still just an employee looking at my time card. I can see now how all my time is being calculated. I can see all those total hours, wages, rates. I can see where I'm working, what I was doing. And from here, we encourage you to have your employees sign off on their time cards. We're going to hit that approve option up at the top right. This is all configurable language, by the way, as well. We call this an attestation message. In this case, I'll say, yep, I acknowledge everything is accurate, and hit submit. And that's me as an employee signing off on my time card. The time card changes colors as a visual cue that this time has been reviewed and approved by the employee. Home screen always takes you back to your home option. Let's walk through these next couple of tiles here real quick. Here I've got an accruals tile. We have a very robust accrual engine. Do all your accrual calculations, again, in real time. Here the employee can cycle through those. We also have the ability to forecast and show an employee what their projected balance is going to be. Maybe I'm looking to take some time off 4th of July weekend. I can grab that date and it's going to show the employee what's your balance going to be on that date. And what it's looking at is what's your balance today, plus what do you do to accrue between now and then, minus any time off that's on the books that hasn't happened yet, right? Showing an accurate balance of what their balance will be on that day. Now here we're just showing it, but we can take this a step further. We can enforce your policy at the time of a request based off of a projected balance. So let's say the employee doesn't have any time in their bucket today, but they're due to accrue enough time between now and the time they're trying to get off. The system will know that and say, hey, even though you don't have the time today, You will have it when you need it, so we can let that request go through. Or vice versa. Maybe I have 40 hours in my bucket today, but I've already put a vacation request out there that's going to eat up those 40 hours, right? Now I go put in another vacation request, the system can say, hey, wait, no, you're not going to have the time available because you're using it over here. So think of that concept. We call it enforcing your policy based on a projected balance, and we can enforce that at the time of a request. Now, speaking of requests, I'm going to pop a couple off here. I can do a request from there. Here's my quick request tile. Again, notice anywhere I'm showing the employee their accruals, I'm showing them what the balance is in those buckets. This one's nice, quick request. I can grab my day, submit. It's going to fire the request off. In my demos, I like to do my requests from my schedule here, which will make more sense in just a moment. Let me introduce you to the schedule though. This is where the employee is seeing when they're supposed to work and where they're supposed to be, right? So I can see what my job, where I'm working, my in and out time, my duration of my shift. This is going to show me the upcoming 7 days. I got holidays coming up here, right? And if I hit this arrow, it's going to take me into a month-to-month view of my schedule. And I like showing this from here because it gives me the opportunity to show what we call a team time off heat map. So we're coming up on Memorial Day weekend. We've got, let's say I want to take the 21st off, for example. I want to make this a long weekend. I'm going to go to the 21st, and you can see on the right-hand side, well, actually, first you can see that the tile itself, the day itself is yellow. That's a visual cue to the employee. We're showing the employee that our team absences are in high demand. And if you look on the top right here, my screen cycled to that. What's going on here is my manager has said, I can afford to give 2 employees that day off. One person's already been approved for that day off. I, as an employee, can even see who was that employee, which one of my coworkers is already approved. In this case, we can see Allie's already been approved for time off, and it's indicating there's 1 seat left. Well, if I want to get it off, I better submit my request. We'll go ahead and hit time off here. You can see here, I can adjust this duration of hours, pick a different bucket. We'll just leave it at the defaults for demo purposes and hit submit. And I have yet another feature turned on. I have what we call automatic approvals turned on. So in this case, the system validated the employee accrual balances, validated staffing for that day. It did it all instantly, and it provided the employee instant feedback. Your time off request has been approved. The employee did not have to wait for somebody else to take a look at things. Why waste that time when the system's capable of doing that for you? You can see here, that time off is already on the calendar. This employee's schedule's already been updated, and it's already on the timesheet. Now, that automatic approval doesn't work for everybody. So I set up another example here on the 22nd. We've already reached our quota that day. We can see Allie and Alan, 2 of my coworkers, are already off. Well, let's say I want to take that day off anyways. We'll go ahead and leave the defaults here. And in this case, it's going to kick off a more traditional time off request. It's given an additional warning. We've hit our quota. We'll submit anyways. And now it's up to the manager to decide whether this employee can get that day off or not. So I just want to show it both ways. Automatic approvals, not required. We can mix and match this as much as we need to for any organization. In this case, though, you can see now that that vacation request has been submitted and is in progress. So covered a lot of ground there. Just a refresher here before we move on to the next role. Just one example of an hourly employee showing how to punch in and out and doing transfers, showing the time card, how to self-report fixes to my time card, see the totals in my time card, how to approve my time card. I showed how to look at accruals, do vacation requests, check my schedule. A lot of ground we covered here in that employee role.
Yeah, and just chipping in real quick here, Ryan, this is really a great example. I mean, a lot of this may seem simple, but that's intentional because this is really where the work happens for a lot of your workforce. Every single interaction that Ryan just showed is an opportunity for disruption of the actual work that person is trying to do in a day. And if this experience is smooth and it's something where they can quickly move through these processes, it suddenly gets those processes and those, things that we need to do to operate well as an organization out of the way of the employee, right? So that employee is now being more productive. They're having a motivating experience interacting with your tools. And again, you're capturing more of that discretionary effort.
Yep, spot on. Thanks, Keen. As Keen was chatting there, I switched roles. I logged out as my employee, logged in as the manager. For the employee, we were just logged in as. So you can see now I'm logged in as a user named William Martin here. You can say same tile-based user experience, different information though. Back to that concept of role-based security, pushing to this user what this user needs to see and do in the system. Now, a couple of tiles we want to highlight right out the gate. Manage time cards tile. What I really like about this is we're going to push to your managers and push to your users the actions and tasks that they need to take to make sure everything's being calculated properly, or to make sure we're addressing any potential red flags that we might have in the system. So you can see here I've got one punch that's we're missing an out punch. I got to fix that one. That's a must fix. I have someone who punched in early. We just want to review that, right? An early in punch or a late out punch, that could lead to overtime. So maybe we want visibility into that and sign off on it. I have a pending change request. That's the change request we did just a moment ago when we were logged in as Wesley, where we said, sorry, I forgot to punch out. It should be 4 o'clock. That's right there. I have 15 time cards that are perfectly clean. So 15 of my employees, everything's on schedule, everything's going as I expected. Those are good to go. Now, we've got this time card tile here, pushing to the manager what they need to do. They also will see all that in their notifications. So up at the top right, here's where we open up our notifications that we push to the user. These notifications aren't just delivered in the app, though. These could be sent to the user via email. If you're using the mobile app, it could be a push notification, and we can address any of those notifications from there as well. But let's take a look at a couple of these. I really like this one down here at the bottom. This is one of our proactive compliance alerts. You can see I hovered my mouse so we can see the complete message, but Tanisha is projected to work overtime unless her schedule is changed. So what this is really doing is this is comparing how the employee has reported time so far to their schedule. So Tanisha in this example has worked extra hours in the overtime measurement period early on in that period. And now if Tanisha works the rest of her schedule, she's going to be in overtime by the end of that period, right? So we're letting the manager know ahead of time in case you have an overtime strategy. Maybe we want to take a look at Tanisha's schedule, move things around so we can avoid that overtime situation. But this is an example of being proactive with that. Instead of having to wait for her to work the overtime and then find out she worked the overtime, we'll let you know ahead of time if an employee is scheduled to get into that situation. Here I got that missed punch. That's that same missed punch we got here that we saw earlier. Here's that request to add that out punch that we submitted when we were in as Wesley, right? We want to add a punch on the 11th at 4 o'clock. And really, I could just hit approve here and I'm done. It'll add that punch. I'm not going to do it yet. I want to show up from somewhere else, but all I have to do is hit approve there. We did 2 time off requests while we were logged in as Wesley. Remember, the first one got automatically approved. That doesn't mean my manager doesn't need to know about it. So here's that first request. Wesley's taken the 21st off. It's already approved. This one, we'll just mark it done, get it off our screen. And now here's that second time off request. This is the one that was not automatically approved. I can see all the details of that here, approve or deny it, or maybe I want more information. I'll click into the request. It's going to take me into more details. And what I like to show here is the concept of a guided recommendation. So in this case, the system is recommending that you refuse this. Why is that? The accruals are in the acceptable range. He's asking off for 8 hours. He has 82 hours available to him. It's because my team absences, I've reached my max. And as a manager, I can pull up that same heat map. I can look at that day and I can see Allie and Alan have already been approved. And now Wesley is what we're looking at, submitted that request. Now it's up to the manager's discretion to approve or refuse that, right? It's up to them, but we're giving them the information right there, easy to consume, and providing a guided recommendation. Let's go back here to the home screen. Let's go to these managed time cards. Now, I talked about this mixed out punch, right? This out punch is the one Wesley submitted. Here's the change request. We got the notification there. It could have been an email notification. Let's say the manager just ignores all the requests, right? And is just looking at timesheets. Here is where a manager can cycle between all their employees' timesheets. I can go through them one by one, or I can go directly to an employee's timesheet. I'm going to go directly to Wesley's timesheet here, and you'll notice that punch request flies on the screen. So even if the manager ignores every notification that they received, which happens sometimes, when they go to the time card, it's going to be on the screen. Right here, I hit approve. In this case, we'll clean it up, and you'll see it adds that punch to the time card. And we've got this icon here as just a visual cue to indicate how did that punch get to the time card. While we're on Wesley's time card, this is who we were logged in as earlier. Let's go ahead, same look and feel and view that we saw before. Previous pay period, notice it's yellow. Wesley signed off on this before. I, as a manager, there's several ways I could do a time card approval, but we'll just do one right here from the time card as well. Again, I can see all those same totals. I can see those same gross calculations, everything in real time. And I am also going to approve this. And you'll notice it changes colors yet again. Green is good. That means both the employee and the manager have reviewed this timesheet and they both gave it the thumbs up. Again, simple concept, but when this is put into play, what you're going to find is this cuts down on payroll errors and historical corrections. We're addressing everything on the front end. Everybody has visibility into their pay on the front end. Everybody green lights it on the front end. Then we have less complications downstream. I'm going to go back home here, and you will see now that we cleaned up those things, my managed time card tile has less alerts on it, right? I have one more thing I need to look at. We've got an early in punch. With any of these, and I could have done this before, I can just select on that arrow. It's going to take me directly to the time card that has the question. Here I can see it's Antoinette's time card, and we can see we're looking at an early in punch. She was scheduled in at 8, punched in at 7. Again, from here, we're just encouraging our managers to mark that as reviewed. Not necessary, but maybe this leads to overtime. Maybe this is just something we want to see. But just like that, kick that off, go back home. And I now, as a manager, have cleaned up all my time card issues, all my time card errors, and all my employees' cards are looking good to go.
And this is that in the moment precision that we were talking about earlier in the intro. This is where, you know, that guidance gets mixed into the flow of what the manager is already doing, and you're seeing that intelligence of the system kind of working throughout these different examples that Ryan's giving here. And ultimately, it's what allows you to cut down on some of that cost leakage execution gap challenge that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly. I think the most important thing to take away is the real-time calculations, real-time access right there at your fingertips, right? And we got a couple more examples of that to walk through here in this session. For example, my managed schedule tile, the next tile on my dashboard. I like this tile a lot. You know, we'll have schedules. We have tons of different scheduling solutions, by the way. You know, every industry has something unique that they require. We have unique scheduling solutions for healthcare. We have unique scheduling solutions in public safety for police and fire. Retail has scheduling solutions, right? What we're looking at here now is just the base scheduling solution that comes with the application, but there's a lot of power just to this one as well. In this case here, this managed schedule tile, right here, it's giving me a snapshot of what's happening with my workforce. I can see who's starting soon, who's coming on shift, who's leaving soon, who's about to leave, scheduled out for the day. I think the most important one is who's missing, who was scheduled to work but didn't show up, right? I can see that right there. From here, I can go in and manage my team's schedules as well. Now, scheduling itself, that's a 2-hour demo, so we'll just keep it high level here. But you can see here, we've got everybody's schedules. They're visually represented. If I want to, I can drag and drop, move shifts around. I can change a schedule. I can call them out sick. I can update a schedule pattern if we're doing patterns. But we have full access to scheduling and visibility right here with the timekeeping solution, all in the same place. Let's start talking about some reporting now and then lead us into our value solution dashboards. We are collecting so much good data with this system, but the data is only as good as how you can consume it, right? So every data element that we have in the solution is reportable. You have access to it. Question is, how do you want to access it and what do you want to do with it? So I have a couple of dashboards here I built, or charts. Anytime you see a chart on my screen, it's really just a report that we're turning into a visualization. With any of these, I can make them full screen, so it's really easy to consume this data, right? I can really see what's going on here. In this case, I got overtime hours by job. Maybe I'm confused by something I see here, or maybe I want more details. Why did I have so much overtime in my CAD operator job? Well, if I select that bar, it's going to bring me into the data view or the report that was populating it, but it's filtered for what I selected. I'm drilling down into the CAD operator. So here I can see actual hours and overtime hours, and I can continue to drill down from here. If I just click anywhere up in that row, it's now going to show me the employees that reported time to that job. And now I can see exactly where those 28 hours of overtime came from. Tanisha had 12, Allie had 16. So think of the power there, just having a simple chart right at the front of the screen, being able to drill down into that information. If I go back to my home screen, I've got another tile right next to my overtime hours, capacity. Love the concept of capacity. Capacity is the concept that I had employees that did not get to the overtime threshold. So I can see I had 94 hours of capacity in my CAD operator. This is one of those ways where we can help you get more strategic. Why did I have 28 hours of overtime when I had 94 hours of capacity? Right here, we can put these things together. I can look at my overtime alert for Tanisha that we highlighted earlier. If I know what job she is, I can go right into the capacity for that job, find employees that aren't going to get to that overtime threshold, maybe shuffle schedules around to cut down on overtime. Again, concept is real-time visibility into this information. A couple more cool dashboards here. These are our fatigue dashboards. These are getting really popular, really anywhere where we're concerned with employee fatigue and burnout. We don't want to overwork employees. Sometimes we're concerned about that just for turnover, right? For overworking employees, burn them out, they're going to leave. Other times it's for job performance. They're doing a very important job. We need to make sure they're well rested and not fatigued so that doesn't impact their performance. So a couple of dashboards we got here. I've got my consecutive days analysis. In this case, I'm defining consecutive days as 2 weeks without getting a day off. And here I can see I had 226 occurrences of that. I can drill into this by job or location or however you want to look at that information. Here I've got short rest analysis. Again, we can drill into this report. This is going to show me, again, this is all configurable, but in this case, we define short rest as less than 8 hours between 2 shifts. And here I can see which employees were impacted by it, when they were impacted, how much rest they got between. Very powerful information right there at your fingertips. Again, all of this is just in a manager dashboard, but I want to wrap us up now with one of my favorite things. These are our value solution dashboards. So you can see I have a link to that right here on this manager's home screen. Think of these now as your more executive dashboards. This is someone with top-down view, look at your whole organization, and different value attributes that we can measure here. Again, in real time. As soon as we're making transactions, we're updating these dashboards. Now, I'm not going to go through everything we see here today, but I want to highlight a couple of ones that I think are pretty impactful. You can see on the left-hand side all these different options we can look at. Let's look at like top overtime use. We'll start here. Here it's flagging all my employees with the most overtime. And on a lot of these, you're going to see how interactive these are. I've got this filter to show me like the top 2% of overtime users. I've got a coordinator way up here at the top right. And when I put my mouse over this, it's showing me exactly how many regular hours they worked, how many overtime hours they worked. I also have that information right here in this table, and I'm even doing the math of how much they made in overtime and what is that in comparison to their total wages. For this employee, almost 50% of their pay is overtime, right? Visibility into this information. First year separations, I think this is pretty impactful. Here I'm looking at, what's my turnover? I can see right here my RN, I hired 129 of them last year and lost 103. Maybe I want to look at this from different angles too. This all has drill down capabilities. So maybe I just want to look at, turnover in the first 6 months. Here we go. In the last 6 months, we hired 54. We lost 75. All right, we're turning over more than we're hiring. That might be a red flag. Something that I can see now, though, or maybe and hopefully do something about. Well, why am I turning over in my RN position so much? We have all these risk reduction factors we could look into. Let's look at shift fatigue, for example. I showed some of those fatigue dashboards. Here's another way to look at that information. We can see my RN position has the most dark blue shifts over 16 hours and the most teal blue under 8 hours rest between shifts. Again, if I click this, it's going to filter everything else for that. And I can even see here's an employee ID 663, had 22 shifts over 16 hours, 20 shifts where they got less than 8 hours rest between, right? Well, no wonder I am turning over my RN position. We're just burning them out. They're fatigued. I can see all that information here in these dashboards. Two more here I like to highlight, punch rounding rules. We talked a little bit about punching early on. When you implement a system like this, oftentimes we're rounding punches. Hey, an employee punches in at 8 o'clock, or is scheduled for 8 o'clock, punches in at 8:07. What do we do with that punch? Do we round it to 8? Do we round it to 8:15? Do we leave it at 8:07? Those are rules you can build into the system. But what this chart's showing me is employees who are maybe taking advantage or not being, helped out by these rounding rules. If I hover my mouse over this employee over here, we can see this employee figured out how to game the system, figured out the rules. And this employee gained 14 hours of time on the in punch because of how we're rounding it, and gained 24 hours of time on the out punch, again, because of how the rounding rules are. This employee is taking advantage of the system. Here, not so fortunate. If we highlight just one of these over here, this employee is losing time because of rounding rules. You can see lost 27 hours on the in punch, lost 6 on the out punch. Again, just great visibility into the data that you might not have access to. One more I like to highlight, on call, no callback, and I like to call this one out because I got a real-time story about this one that I'm working on right now. But here I'm highlighting employees that were on call but weren't called back. So I can see this employee, 930, right? Was on call for almost 1,200 hours and never got called back, right? Sign me up for that job. I'll take that pay, never getting called back. Here I have a department that had almost 700 hours of on-call, never called anybody back. Does this department really need an on-call program, right? Just ways to look at this data. Also, ways to identify areas of opportunity. So, quick story I'll wrap us up with. I've got a current customer I'm working with that we showed them this, and these on-calls were huge red flags. Their hours were even worse than this. Had an employee with 5,000 hours of on-call, never called in. Well, it turned out they just weren't set up on-call and callback appropriately. They weren't using the right codes. So using this information, we are now working with them to re-educate their managers on how to use this properly so that they can get better information on it. And that's an example, right? This dashboard here, these are available standalone, but these are also available in our Emerald services is something that we offer, which Keen's going to give you a little bit more information on this in just a moment. The Emerald services is an enhanced service option. And one of the things that's included is these dashboards, but also a quarterly check-in with this dashboard where we sit down with you, we review these dashboards with you, identify areas of opportunity, and then help you develop a plan to take advantage of the information we're learning here. So I'll wrap us up there with these workforce value solution dashboards. Again, concept I want to get across here, that real-time access to information right at your fingertips, easy to understand and consume, and then give you the ability to make the decisions you need with your workforce. So I think I'll stop sharing now, Keen, and kick this back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Ryan. All right. So, Ryan just really showed, again, before I get into this Emerald experience piece, All of this is again how we're engaging in that flow of work with employees, how the managers are being able to, spend less time administrating and more time out there with the employees, driving the vision, helping your employees to feel motivated and confident in the decisions that they're making and the tasks that are happening in the workflow. And then boiling all that information up to the executive level so that your operations officers, your HR leaders, your executives as a whole can really take stock of what's going on with the organization, not just see it, but also get recommendations around how to act on that information. And this service component is the other piece. Like we aren't just relying on technology to do this for you. We're also a consultative partner when you need it. So we're here to give you our expertise in partnership with you and personalize that expertise through partnership programs like Emerald Experience to really give you that priority care that you may need, and to be, a dedicated manager of your experience and co-creator of your experience with you. So we can establish some real parameters for growth with you. We can, like Ryan said, kind of check in on the metrics more regularly, and we can help you to, work as a strategic advisor to really drive home where we could make the biggest measurable impact as an organization, and then flow that back into the tools. And then, the AI can pick up where we left off and keep you kind of in the loop on how all of those things should be working and give you those recommendations in the moment, like you were seeing baked into the system. So that's really how we like to operate. And the thing I want to leave you all on is this is not fictional, right? We can show you dashboards, we can show you displays, but ultimately the proof is in what's happening for the real organizations that we work with each day. And this is a great example of that. Look at the reduction in manual administrative tasks alone here. 80% just in scheduling. Think about how much Ryan showed in the workforce management space. Scheduling was one component. That is more than 300 hours annually alone in that one functional area. Think about the efficiency that that's capturing for you. Think about the labor gaps here. Over 600 open shifts filled through that employee self-service. When you give people the opportunity to feel engaged in their schedule and to adjust their schedule to the balance that they need, think about some of those burnout metrics we were showing you. This makes a real game changer in terms of the business, in terms of that cost leakage, in terms of that burnout, all of those things that we were talking about earlier. Ultimately, we can improve your employee satisfaction through taking some really simple steps to increase the ability of you to automate and implement the processes that you should be following anyway as an organization. These things are not competing with each other. They're a part of one workforce experience that reinforces your goals. And so this is real. This happens every single day for the organizations we work with. And we hope that you'll consider us after seeing this demo for your workforce management needs.